We're super excited to be here in the 1827 barn. This is our final speaker series session of 2017. And for those of you who don't know this series, we started it up this year, and we've had 4 other really interesting presentations, from talking about individual nutrition, agroforestry, a vision for a regional food system, to even GMOs.
Welcome.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Wright-Locke, we are a very unique organization. And every year, I've been here for 4 years, every year I keep seeing more and more community engagement, people discovering this farm, and it's really inspiring. And we are all here passionate about growing to keep accommodating this interest. One thing that I think is really particularly relevant to tonight's talk is that at Wright-Locke Farm, we think that cooking and gathering to eat together is a crucial part of promoting a healthy lifestyle, as well as really building strong communities. So cooking education is really something important to us. However, we don't have our own commercial kitchen on site at this moment. So this is one of the reasons that we're actually embarking on a new campaign to cultivate the future and build a new year-round education center here. And then that would be complete with a teaching kitchen, classroom spaces, and a big lecture hall as well. So we could actually do this throughout the winter time, which would be awesome. But I won't go into too many details there. There's a lot of information over on the welcome table where you guys walked in. And there's also plenty on our website as well. But while we're here for tonight, I'd love you to keep that idea of a new education center in your mind as we listen to Marydale talk about really, like, what is the potential that we have here at Wright-Locke Farm, and to adapt some of the information and the experience that Marydale has and the programming that she's put in place, and how can we use that here at the farm? Because I think we could do so much. So just keep that in the back of your mind while you're listening in. But tonight we have the pleasure of hearing Marydale Debor, who has dedicated her life to improving the health of our people. With her experience as a lawyer and many years of working with organizations whose mission was to improve healthcare services, she was brought in as a senior executive to a community hospital in Connecticut, where she helped revolutionize their approach to food, nutrition, and clinical care. The program at Milford Community Hospital is now widely renowned and serves as a model for other institutions. Since then, she's founded Fresh Advantage, which assists healthcare organizations, educational institutions, and community-based organizations to create integrated food service and learning programs for those that they serve. Marydale is also a lecturer at the Yale School of Medicine, and where she teaches graduate students about the role of food for clinical practice and community prevention programs. So we could not be happier to have Marydale Debor here tonight, and we are so fortunate to be able to learn from her and her experiences. So I just would love to have you help me welcome her to the stage tonight.
So I just am thrilled. I think you all have something very precious here. And I wanted to ask a few questions. And Archie, I don't know, if there's so many new people here, Archie is the director of this wonderful place. Why don't you raise your hand? So, you know, I thought there were a lot of newcomers. How many people live in Winchester? Oh, a lot. Okay, that's good. How many people work in, for lack of a better general term, medicine or healthcare? Oh, you do? Okay, that's great. I know one person. My dentist is here. She is a Winchester resident. She is whip smart, and I'm thrilled she's here. Her children come to programs here. Well, when I thought about how to best use our time together tonight, I decided to do the following. And this is just sort of a brief overview of how I thought we could structure this. Indeed, as Kim said, I was an executive at a community hospital, much like Winchester Community Hospital, only a bit smaller, in Northwest Connecticut, for 7 years. And I had the great good fortune to have a CEO who was a doc and we set up a preventive medicine, preventive cardiology clinic. So he was key in sort of giving me the green light to just go full bore and fix what was a very terrible problem with our patient food service, but also to be creative and see what more we could do to integrate food and nutrition into the activities of the hospital in general. So I thought, well, this is fortuitous because we had many community partners, one of which was a place like this in Northwest Connecticut. It was a cooking school and a farm. You're going to have your cooking school, right, Archie, when you build your new center? And they were partnered. I thought, God, the parallels are just so great. I have to talk about this. And so that'll be the first part of this talk. And I do want you to, interrupt if you're really confused or if I'm talking too fast or you think this is like the craziest idea you ever heard of. Save that for later, after, like when we break. You can tell me how crazy you think it was. But we did it. Then secondly, because now this was a long time ago that we did this. It's like BC and AD. We in healthcare talk about before the ACA and after the ACA, because that was so pivotal in creating the situation we now have today, which is very difficult and chaotic. But nevertheless, this work was done from 2004 to 2011. So keep that in mind. Secondly, from that point on, there was a merger. You're going to have a merger here, okay? So we can ask questions about that. I left at that time, and I started my own consulting practice because I really wanted to take what I had learned in this systems approach. I was an administrator and a lawyer. I was not a nutritionist. I think of myself as a facilitator of the gifts of other people who can make things work. And I started a business where I do, in fact, go out to other environments, healthcare, education, and I now am involved in doing a lot of policy work. So I thought the other thing we could talk about tonight is what's changing, what's happening on the national scene. Are we seeing food move to medicine? And that'll be the second part of the talk. And then I just wanted to give you a few takeaways, and then we have the Q&A. So with your permission, I'm going to go ahead with the model program and start with that. So this is it. We even had our own logo. We were big believers in marketing, swag, outfits for the kids. But we named this Plow-to-plate. And we, as I said, we decided on this initiative because we had this visionary CEO. But one of the problems was he wouldn't even go into the cafeteria and eat. That's how bad it was. So we had a big problem. We also were having things happening in our community that we saw that were extremely troubling. The pediatricians were seeing an uptick in type 2 diabetes in children. They were seeing just the beginnings of really a very terrible obesity epidemic in a rural community where they really hadn't seen that in internal medicine practices. And so we decided that we really had a moral dilemma. We did not come at this as a function of anything at all in the nature of saving money or doing what was groovy that was going to get people's attention. Because we were really just at the beginning of a food movement in our country at that time when we did this work. So it was a pretty big leap to take this on and do it. And I think it's important to say that the pediatrician, the CEO, and the wonderful chef, community chef, who really developed the strategy and the components with me, along with the team at the hospital of RDs and other physicians, we were very struck by these data. And this is one of the things that I have so much trouble with, and we were talking at dinner before this, is this whole emphasis on return on investment, this short-term thinking. If we do this, what's going to be the ROI, blah, blah, blah. We need to take a shift here, and it starts at the local level with people like you in rooms like this, interfacing with community organizations, hospitals, and the like, to say, no, we have to change. We have to think longer term, and we have to be patient. We need capital to be patient, and we need to stick to it. So this is pretty scary, and I have a little parenthetical there around date, because that data point, 1 in 3 children will be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. That is a 2015 number. We think it may be worse. That's in the general population. We already know, as of data reported, about 18 months ago, that was even a year earlier, so 2.5, that if you're talking about African American children, it's 1 in 2, and that is just unforgivable, just wrong. So keeping your eye on these population health in the big vision sense is very important. And we sat down and we said, what are we going to do about this? We're an anchor institution. We're an asset in this community. We have to do something. So we went about planning stepwise to make change in the following way. Okay. We said, we got to walk the walk. We have a really lousy food service. We have terrible patient satisfaction numbers. I don't know if you're familiar with that now, but it's now sort of a holy grail. Hospitals get paid on the basis of their patient satisfaction survey numbers and data. There's no separate question for food, but we know food is a big influencer overall on general satisfaction data. Back when I was doing this, we just, we surveyed it, we knew it was bad, but it wasn't a reimbursement issue. So we said, we create a healthy food hub in our place. And that was a little bit of a bloody battle because we had to fire the food service vendor, go through an RFP process, be very strict, write a values-driven RFP. They thought we were nuts. I mean, when I sent it out, I said, now our problem's going to be if nobody bids. But that didn't happen, thank God. And we did get some bids, and we did write a contract that had our values in it, our goals. It wasn't really ironclad, like 20% local procurement, because we didn't know if we were going to be able to do this. This was an experiment. We knew it was an experiment. So you do not want to hamstring yourself when you know you're experimenting, but you want to stick to your values. And so we did, and it was a great success. We did something that was really revolutionary. We eliminated the menu that was this long with 8,000 things. People in the hospital, and you're trying to check everything off. We said we're going to shift it, put all the money in ingredients, go to local procurement when we can do it. The qualities in ingredients, we're going to have 2 things. We always have things on the side for people that have special needs, but basically 2 delicious things, some sides. We're going to make it super friendly with beautiful collateral, and we're going to serve it and talk to people, take their orders, and humanize it. I'll show you in a minute, we made a presentation at a big national conference about the impact of this. Let's see. Let me go back. Okay. It worked beautifully. The other thing that sorry if these are a little wonky. It's always when I need my grandson when I'm doing slides or anything with the computer, But another one of the values that we used was that this is a farm that it was right near the hospital. And we said, we should support this economy. Why are we having these big trucks come in? Cisco, US Foods, it's the reality, we need them. We just need them to work with more local farms. Well, let's support our local farms. We developed a whole quality control system that we don't have time to talk about tonight, but we did. We knew that we were getting safe product. And then we also started with the thought that we had to have a community coalition. This is a relevant point, I think, here, to support the change, because this was going to be a sea change. Do you know that term comes from Shakespeare's play, The Tempest? I always hear people talking, but a friend of mine said, we're more like The Tempest, a sea change. So we developed a community coalition right from the beginning, and we brought all these people into the process, and this is while we were doing the bidding and all this really terribly boring stuff that lawyers do. And we said, here's what we're going to do. We believe that our identity as a hospital requires that we pay attention to what you eat and that you're healthy, and it really, really matters. You can avoid sickness, and if you are sick, that's going to be part of the way we take care of you. And we gathered them all up at a community center, sort of looked like this, and we talked about it, and everybody thought we were out of our minds, and especially the farmers. It's these Yankee farmers. They go back, and then they tilt on the chair. It's very intimidating when they do that, because I'm sure if I try to, And but we said, and we always fed them, of course. We always had a delicious meal. And we'd say, and we're going to do this with the kitchen. So periodically, we kept bringing the community together about, here's what we're doing at the hospital. So let's see, let's go back. So in addition to our values about the moral dilemma was seeing incidence rate and disease go up, we also had this value of our local economy. Okay, so we have the healthy food hub, the patient service, and the cafeteria. Fast forward about 3 years. We even remodeled it a little bit. We didn't have a lot of money, and I had to keep this within my existing budget. That's why I eliminated 8 million things, having something that looks like a food court, and said, we're going to make it so delicious, you'll love it. It's going to be simple. The New York Times wrote us up. The article was called Defying a Stereotype, because a lot of people in the town were coming to eat lunch at the hospital. The mayor would come, and we were like faxing to the post office and Home Depot. That's before email was really popular. And people would just show up for lunch. They loved it. It was great. What a great message to send to the community that this is what your hospital stands for, as well as the ability to care for you if you're ill. Okay, so here we are. We've got this great kitchen, and we decided we need a culinary garden. So let's see, I'm going back. I don't want to do that. We decide that we need a culinary garden. There's no place to put the garden, so we put it on top of the loading dock, and we used cyclone fencing to grow the beans, and it was clearly makeshift. But we also then started bringing the community in, the littles, the Daisy. I never knew there were Daisy Scouts. They're really little. And the moms and coming in, and we actually used this, and we grew it and used product from our garden as well as farms and local procurement. So we start really changing the topography, even the way it looks and feels in the hospital. And we were able to show, do you know the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, Don Berwick? He ran for governor, but very extraordinary. They've really done a lot in terms of patient safety and making healthcare better. We got a paper published there. We're the only food paper at this whole big conference. And this is what happened, that when we went from the 38th percentile to the 95th for the quality of our food and patient satisfaction. So we had data, and that's very important when you're wanting to show change, and you're wanting to convince people that you're not just making this up, right? You want data. Okay. Then we embarked upon a plan to target, this is think of the hub and spoke, these other programs in the community. How am I doing, Kim? Okay. And the first thing, trying to think how I did. The first thing that we started doing were the events in the culinary garden where we're bringing the kids in and the scouts, and we teach them to grow food. The other thing that we did, and this is how I think of Wright-Locke, what it could be and move to with its new center, we did community food learning events, just in general, at the silo, at the farm in New Milford, where it was a cooking school. And we had a very interesting, oh, that's clever. Here's the faculty. Here's another thing that we did that was really fun. It was like tonight. We advertised, come and learn. That's Joe Baumster on the right from Stonington. He is the most incredible scallop fisherman. He flash freezes right on his boat, so it's fresh and good. So we have him come. We have John Tureen, who used to be the chef at Yale and now has his own consulting firm. He worked with Alice Waters at Yale when they did a big food change. And that's my partner in crime on this Plow-to-plate initiative, along with Chef Ian, I'll tell you about in a minute. She's a pediatrician, New Milford Hospital. So who was teaching? This was the triumvirate that was teaching, which had great symbolism and great content. It made people think different about food, that this was the faculty. Okay, I'm going back. Let me hop around. So those at-large events, along with the quarterly community meetings of the different representatives of the food bank and the aging and the community coalition that I showed you, sort of built up momentum in the community. It sort of percolated the interest and said, oh, maybe this hospital's changing a little bit. Not that people didn't like it, but they just, never thought about it in this way before. So the next thing that we did that it was very near and dear to my heart was youth chef advocates, and I think that is ripe for this community to take a look at as well. We decided we were going to take kids ages 5th grade to 8th grade, partner with the youth agency, because a lot of the kids are latchkey and they maybe weren't the kids on the baseball teams. After school, the youth agency had a need to enrich its programming, and we were going to model a program based upon the Truth Campaign. I don't know if anybody here remembers what the Legacy Foundation did during the years of the tobacco wars. You're shaking your head, they engaged youth around that age and they educated them about how the tobacco companies were lying to them and misleading them. And these kids, talk about get religion, they were at a developmental age that made an impression. It was a worthy cause. The Legacy Foundation had very good curriculum. They really demonstrated how the tobacco companies were lying and harming them. Well, sadly, in this country, there is an analog to industrial agriculture. We have really bad processed food, and it's hurting us. It wasn't quite as stark and severe, and it's a little more complicated case to make. But we said, let's teach the kids about what real food is. Let's create a curriculum. It'll be many months. We will have our faculty be a great chef attended the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York. You may know of it. We will have Dr. Dye, that's our pediatrician. We will have farmers teaching the kids. We will go out, we will learn about, we'll go on the scallop boat, we'll go out to a sustainable beef place, we'll go out to vegetable farms, we'll harvest, we'll bring, we'll learn how to use what we get, and we'll serve it to family and friends. So the kids get it full bore from where does this come from to serve family and friends, where they learn proper serving and look people in the eye when you talk to them and engage it. And that soon became the hottest ticket in town. The first time we had a series that would be once a month and it would be 3 days in a row because that's the way we had to do if we were going to go to the farm, the prep and the serve. And it just grew and grew and grew. And then the kids became advocates, just like the kids from the Truth Campaign. If you Google it, you'll see it was really impressive. And they all had to do an advocacy project. So one of the kids, they raised money for something in the community that was going on to save a farm, and they all had independent things that they were doing. And some of them, we followed them. They made decisions to go to ag school, to chef school. They've gone to the University of Vermont and moved on and focused on majors in sustainability. So that was a very wonderful experience. Sorry, I don't mean to do that. The other thing we also focused on were specific populations. I brought an example of a video that we did, cancer patients. We pulled together information. Rebecca Katz is a wonderful chef in San Francisco. Great menus, the Cancer Fighting Kitchen, specific things. We put together an entire program, again at the silo, which is sort of like this place, and with an educational room, and it was incredibly important to cancer survivors. From the day you're diagnosed, you're a survivor. I don't know if you're familiar with that principle, but that's how we regard people who receive a diagnosis. You're a survivor from day one. They came, these were customized meals. We were helping them deal with side effects and to have a nutritional, nutritious and delicious diet while they were being treated. Then we decided that we dealt with the obesity problem through an evidence-based and family-based program. We dealt with whole families that had a lot of obesity in the family. We published a children's book. We commissioned this gentleman, Billy Steers. He has a series to do Tractor Mac, and the pediatricians and everybody worked with him. We distributed over 10,000 in the state of Connecticut. There's one here to Head Start in the schools, and we had really fun stuff going on. So as you can see, this is like the whole idea is come at it from every angle you can come at it. Be creative, get partners, just pull everybody into the boat. One of the last things, and we did a partnership with the town farmers market because we're too small to have a separate one, at our hospital and compete. We just partnered. One thing that still The chef, their Chef Carrie, they still have the same food program post-merger. And the one other thing that they maintained was the senior suppers, which I think is important. And I've looked through the materials from Winchester Hospital. The health priorities here are obesity and wellness. They are focused on seniors. So the hospitals documented in the community health needs assessment that they have that these are issues that matter to them. They have data and they've set priorities. So we're not making this up here. They care about this and they're committed in their community benefit programs to looking at that, doing something about it, investing in solutions. So senior suppers, we had a terrible readmission rate problem. And we were, in the executive suite and looking at these numbers, and people are flipping back in, relapse pneumonia, relapse heart failure. And the clinicians are saying that's because they're medication mismanagement or they get confused. And so I said to myself, I said, something else is going on here. These rates are too high. Let's go talk to the Visiting Nurses Association. I happen to think these people are angels on earth. I love the VNA. They're just incredible. And let's go talk to the senior centers. Let's try to figure out what's going on. Go home, no support system, no food. They weren't eating because they had no way to do it. They had no discharge plan that rationalized access to services and what they needed. They come back dehydrated and relapse with that same pneumonia. Well, that's just, come on, let's fix this. So we did. We looked at our discharge, and it's very technical stuff. I won't, if you're really interested, we can go sidebar on that. But what we did is we started to feed them. We'd use the downtime in the cafeteria. It's like 4 to 6, and everybody who's getting paid and, is empty. And I'm like, what? No, we're going to fill the tables. So we set up a very formalized program of orientation. Each senior center come in with their senior center director, learn about the hospital cafeteria, learn who the people are, who's the chef, make it easy and familiar. Have doctors come down and chat, have dessert in another part with music, have all kinds of activity. And it is enormously successful, so much so that we put in a reservation line with like 2 seatings. And we priced it at $5, and it really cost about $1.65 more, but we took that, because we're a nonprofit hospital, reported on our tax returns as what we call community benefit credit. But the difference it made, not just, I can't tell you because I didn't have the kind of money I needed for the kind of evaluation I wanted to do. I was raising all the money anyway for the programs that I couldn't draw a straight line to say this reduced our readmission rate, but with the discharge planning fixes and this, our readmission rates went down. So you're looking at what else changed in the community, not much. So it still continues today, and the other benefits were it dealt with isolation, it was community around a table of food. And then people started to take out, when one spouse was sick, and which is fine. You want all that. You don't know what's going to come of it. It's an experiment, right? So if it's successful, it should go in all different directions. Okie doke. So you can see this constellation was because we put in our footprint a statement that food and nutrition are part of healthcare practice. We even changed our org chart because what has happened in this country and in hospitals, and there are a lot of complicated post-World War II sociological and economic reasons, is we just lost our way with respect to food. And it's reflected in the hospital environment. So if you look at an org chart, you'll see, clinical services, IT, finance, ancillary services, housekeeping, laundry, food, garbage, all over here. I said, no, clinical care, put it right over there. That's a big deal. That's really hard to change an org chart. And there aren't many that are, they're all still ancillary services, but it's the thinking around it. No, it's part of clinical practice. That's what we do. We think about this. We screen, the other thing we did, we started screening everybody for malnutrition because we have huge rates now in this country. So we included the day camp in the summer. We included the RDs would go out and did all kinds of enrichment in summer day camps. We did not directly get involved in schools at that time. That's just a function of where we were and what needs we were going to right away. It's also, that was way before, and we're going to get to, in a minute, talk about the movements that are happening that are doing that. I think today that would be one of the first places we could go if we could. And there's now a network, Farm to School network, that supports that kind of effort. But we did reach a lot of kids in the day camps. I forgot to mention that. Maybe on here. Oh yeah, summer. Yeah, the advocates, the local farms procurement. There's one of our delivery folks. We did also a lot of educational collateral. I can share this with you, but we only have so much time. But we had like menus that were really beautiful, and we had tray cards that said these blueberries come from and where they were and what their nutritional values were, and people would always take those home. You know, they would have something that was beautiful. Hospitals are not beautiful on the inside normally, except for the VIP floors. They're pretty beautiful. But, you know, so we wanted to make it fun and lovely and embracing instead of some like necessary evil. And that's how food is treated in many institutions. So, but it was building, it was from the community up. From the community up. And, you know, we did it for love. We did it, it was the right thing to do. So you can still do things for that reason. That's why I don't use the term ROI that much. Okay, let's, when those farmers came along after a while, they were the biggest supporters at the end of the day. They weren't all curmudgeonly. They just said, oh, this is a pretty good deal. And some of them even came and ate lunch with the mayor and others in the cafeteria. Okay, there's our data, there's our littles. This is a wonderful program. That's Chef Ann, who was our chef. And these kids, we bought them knife kits, like a professional chef. They were like 12 to 14 years old. They were wicked on these. They were so respectful and so really good at what they did because we treated them with respect. We said, you can do it. You better pay attention. No messing around. It was real discipline. But they had so much pride and ownership of it. It was just great. And in fact, at one national meeting of a group, Healthcare Without Harm, I don't know if anybody's heard of it, talk more about them in a minute. They're all about the greening of hospitals, Healthcare Without Harm. Based in Boston, started in Boston, lots of good things in Boston. I've worked with them for a long time, and the CEO of it at that time said to me, could you bring your kids to our national conference? I said, sure. It's in Detroit at the MGM Grand Casino. I'm like, oh my God, kids in a casino. But anyway, they had to go around. We had to walk around and everything. But we had to raise the money to go. So we had fundraisers in the community. The kids did everything. And we went to Detroit. And they served the meal break on the first day with the MGM chefs. There are these little 12-year-old kids coming in with professional knife kits and whites and chef hats and everything. And the chefs were like, what have you gotten us into? This is a liability. Like what we're like, chill, watch them. Well, by the end, the chefs were just like, whoa, this is great. They were so excited. And the kids really did the work and they served. And I got to tell you, people were fascinated. We got so much, media at home about it. But they delivered an event for 250 people with the MGM Grand Chefs. So can be done, right? This is you see what I mean about collateral? Everything, we just prettied it up because it makes a difference. Okay, these are my caveats. It's not the norm. I feel like it was Camelot in a way when I see what's happening now in healthcare, what we're reduced to. It's really sad. But it can be done. And this is documented. I think you were sent some things about it. And pieces of it can be done. If people get together at the grassroots level, focus on one thing, two things. You don't have to go, we did this whole big thing because we could. We just took advantage of a negative space and we moved in and did it. Robust community partnerships. We never invented anything that somebody else was doing. The youth agency was there. They had a facility. They had this. The silo on the farm, the cooking school, let's use that. We never wasted where there was an asset that we could pick up and partner, which is another key to doing this work as we move along. Because in this day and age, we are going to have to do more of this if we're going to turn these numbers around. Even forget, Congress has defunded this, that, and the other thing. Well, we have to take charge. The community level, we have to do this work, and we have to embrace long-term thinking and focus on prevention. We don't want to have these horrible rates of chronic disease that we have now. We can't afford to treat what we have now. It's going to get worse and worse and worse with my generation. So we got to get active and go local. Systems approach, it's systems thinking, and a lot of this can be adapted. Okay, food moves to medicine. So stepping back from this, like I said, I felt like it was Camelot, that we had. So I didn't realize that until years later, saying, "Wow, we were so lucky. We were so lucky." Why is food moving to medicine? Why are we seeing some changes going on? Some sad facts and some good facts. The obesity and chronic disease epidemics have just taken over. And hospitals and physicians are just basically freaked out. They don't know what to do. And we have to start thinking, even though we don't have systems in place to put money where we need it, and I know we have someone here who works a lot, Matt, in that area, in order to incorporate paying for things like food in medical care or food for people who are homebound and need good food. We'll talk a bit about what's going on with that in a minute. But it's just sort of hitting everybody. Maybe we need some other people other than MBAs and MD PhDs to think about how to deal with this problem of food and infuse it in. And that's the work I'm doing now at Yale Medical School. Is I'm working with the kids in the medical school and the residents and talking about team-based practice, pulling in people from other disciplines and figuring out how do you do this. You do not need to be a nutritionist and an MD. We get that. Don't get scared, calm down. Here's how you do it. Here's when you get to clinic, here's what you think about, here's what you do. And they're driving it. The kids in medical school now are driving it, thank God. At Yale, they formed their own U.S. Health Justice Collaborative where they look at social determinants of disease, and they said, well, this curriculum is inadequate, so just make up our own course. Went out, found their own faculty across the university and in New Haven, and we're doing it. I was already on faculty. But the other thing is that we have very high rates of food insecurity in this very rich country, very high rates. And, of course, correlates directly and most harshly on low-income people of color and people really getting sick. I was very struck when a colleague of mine at UCSF said, I went into residency, I came out a pediatrician, and I realized one day I was diagnosing gastrointestinal disease in little children. They were just hungry. They hadn't eaten. I was trying to give inhalers to kids all the time. They would come back and back and back. I said, why am I doing? They need an air conditioner and a vacuum cleaner. I mean, this is what that generation of medical student is now getting. It'll take a lot of work to get there to implement all this, but we're heading. I'm very hopeful about them. I love teaching them. I think they're fantastic. The other thing is we're seeing a real traction in research and evidence. We have very talented young investigators, one at UCSF, one at Harvard who's moving to UNC. Seth is going to UNC. And they are doing exquisite research, most recently showing that SNAP, the food stamp subsidy, actually correlates to a reduction in healthcare expenditure. This data is critical. That's what's going to have an impact on hospital administrators, because even though I believe that we should never lose our moral compass, you have to know that you've got to have other metrics and other compelling arguments along with that one, which is, I just don't want people to lose sight of that one. that we are able to show that it reduces readmissions if we support people with food support, that, all these things that are factored into the hospital enterprise, we can quantify. So, and also more advocacy. There are national coalitions popping up about the importance of food and nutrition in healthcare healthcare practice that are really very positive. That's a fundamental problem. It's because of, what we eat, what we drink. We're up against a lot of very powerful industries. This whole soda tax thing, the millions of dollars that the beverage, the lobby for the Beverage Association pours into these local tax things. We could build 30 education centers at Wright-Locke Farm. But that's why we need grassroots action. That's why we need to take ownership right when we walk out our front door. That's the only way to deal with that kind of power and money. This is food insecurity. I put this slide in because it illuminates the problem and why healthcare is now starting to pay attention, why young investigators, MD, PhDs, and MD and PHs are doing this research, getting a literature base so we can make the case on food as medicine. And, it's women and children, the elderly. And we have one more person at the lecture. No, that's it. So I just wanted to see how that, kind of pans out and who is most disaffected. The fact that food insecurity and malnutrition is compromising clinical care is really, really impacting the clinical experience and clinicians themselves. These are scary numbers. You're admitted to a hospital and a third of patients are already malnourished or food insecure. If you don't pay attention to that, you're going to have a problem. These people are going to keep flipping back in for care into your hospital unless you find a way to fix it, systematize it, and get connected to community resources. That's why I'm working nationally with a lot of groups that are working very, very hard to do a lot of just standard clinical practice, food insecurity screening, carte blanche. Got to do it, got to know it, and you should have referral mechanisms. But if you don't screen, we're not going to have data to force that we have to take action. Med school. Does anybody know about this program at Tulane? It's fantastic. You do. Yeah, good. Sorry?
My daughter is part of it.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that's great. Yeah, so they really take it in a big way, and they're now licensing it to other medical schools where they I just love this slide, it's so funny. And with Rhode Island, Johnson, and Wales, and this is because I know how important dentists are. They are untapped resource. You think about how much interaction you have with the children, how many times, dentists, clinicians, orthodontics, that's a whole other outlet for education and attention and raising awareness. Okay, let's talk about food as medicine very specifically. Okay, this is what we're seeing is a movement that started in the 1980s that was designed to help AIDS patients who suffered then from something called wasting syndrome. And for those of you around long enough, that most of those people died. We now have drugs that maintain, and it's miraculous that people who are living with AIDS don't get that anymore, but a lot of other people do. And a lot of the organizations that formed to take care of that problem in the 80s are now expanding their reach because they figured out how to feed people with medically tailored home delivered meals. And this is a whole national network of community-based nonprofit organizations. God's Love We Deliver in New York, Community Servings here, and they have formed something called the Food as Medicine Coalition. They are working extremely hard to interface with insurance companies, Medicare, Medicaid, to find some flexibility in those revenue streams to pay for this kind of food support. Now, this is food support for people who are truly ill, that are homebound, but we can make the case with respect to the impact of that. We can then make the case more broadly once we get recognition that that is a legitimate part part of clinical care for those people and can really make a difference in their well-being and in their healing. They also, I'm very happy to say, because I work a lot with this group, and this is in Jamaica Plain, they just received a very large Robert Wood Johnson grant to really go deep and match data sets, insurance claims data set, et cetera, to quantify the impact that this has on sustaining lives and helping people heal. So this, 15 years ago, it's unheard of for, investments in research like that to be being made. And this is what's going to force change, along with dedication and boots on the ground, and, every other thing that I've been talking about here tonight. But this kind of investment by the big funders to document this and quantify it is very, very important. Healthcare Without Harm, another Boston-based, started here. Be proud. It has been working for a very long time in the greening of hospitals, and healthy food and healthcare is one of their initiatives. So we're seeing that kind of advocacy going ahead. And I do consulting with them on a variety of things. So being aware of these more macro movements, I told you about my one little hospital, and it's, the parallels it might have for your community. Being aware, I think, should give us all hope that there is more attention, and that these are places we can go for data, information, and any kind of thing we might want to do in our own lives or our own communities in terms of advocacy. Massachusetts Farm to School. I don't know much about your school food here. I heard rumors that maybe it wasn't so fabulous, but I love the Farm to School Network nationally. It's real. It's a real movement now. It's national. It's funded. There are talented people at the national level. USDA has funding for it. The U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's genuinely giving traction to this whole food movement, and interfacing with another huge institutional sector, and investing in people when they're young is going to pay off later big time. Even though my work has been in adult and adult critical care hospitals mostly, I'm very impressed. And these are all the farms that in Massachusetts from which foods are procured for schools. And they're getting some private philanthropy too. One very prominent family foundation here in Boston that I do some work with has actually funded a lot of work in the Chicopee system and stuff. So there's real interest in doing this, and we're hoping that'll migrate over to the hospital sector, because a lot of the schools have food service management companies that also work in hospitals. Food service management companies is a different lecture. Don't get me started what that's about. But they do control a lot of the institutional food systems. So more advocacy. In 2 years, well, let me start with the older one, Children's Health Watch. Does anybody know of it? It started in Boston with the Grow Clinic at Boston Medical Center. Debbie Frank is a wonderful pediatrician who addressed the failure to thrive syndrome in children being malnourished, basically. Back in the day, we called it failure to thrive. We didn't know what really was going on, but it's basically the biggest driver is lack of food, nutritious food. And they have a Grow Clinic, but Debbie was very smart. And she said, we've got to do research. We've got to have research where we're monitoring these developments all across the country at safety net hospitals. So they do that. They have a remarkable database where they can see trends. Like in 2008, all the uptick of all these negative events with children being more and more food secure. Well, what happened in 2008? We had, an economic downturn in this country that was severe. Then they take that and they advocate at the local, state, and federal level. So this is great because they have a very rich database and they know how to do it, and they're really great advocates. And they just had some recent victories vis-a-vis Medicaid in Massachusetts. Root Cause Coalition, another interesting development. A CEO of a health system in Ohio, ProMedica. This guy's really incredible. He just decided, if you look at my hospital balance sheet, this looks great. This hospital's doing really great. And then, he does this in his talk, on the other half of the slide, you look at all the data in his community, it's a disaster. The unemployment rates, the food insecurity rates, the homeless rates, That's a post-industrial city. They lost everything when Detroit went south, so did everything around it with all the supply chains into Detroit. And the community's busted. He said, so why am I doing well as a hospital CEO? I've got to become an anchor institution. I have to change my whole way of thinking. And he did it. And one of the main things he did was create this national coalition, the root cause of illness, or conversely, health. He's created a membership of all these organizations, other hospitals, other CEOs who are saying, we're going to look at this. We're going to get active. We're going to make the same changes in our hospitals. This is why it counts when CEOs speak. CEO to CEO works. It's probably the only thing, well, not the only thing, public policy, and also the grassroots. And they are very grassroots because they really go out and they really partner with a lot of other, like food banks, community-based organizations that solve this problem with us. We cannot solve this alone. We have to take a whole new approach to integrating community resources and our hospital operations and really become anchor institutions and improve community well-being. This is 2 years old. They just had their second summit. They had 450 people there. They had last year at their first conference, and these were all pretty high-level people in their respective institutions. They had, leaders from HHS and elsewhere, and it's gotten traction really quickly, and they keep accreting membership. So I think all this is positive. I think it's going to be a tough haul because we've just got, healthcare is in a very difficult place. But I think that's also an opportunity because I think we have to look inward and we have to create, solutions to this at the local level. And there are ways to do it. And that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. So my takeaways are build from the ground up, learn from others, a lot of good work going on, a lot of good work. Build a business case for strong health promoting food systems, whatever way we can. But hold tight to your moral compass. That's what makes you get up every day when you have a few arrows in your back. Believe me, I know. And protect and strengthen the gems in your midst, like Wright-Locke, because they will perish if you don't support them. And you can't afford to lose them. And I've seen that in community after community as I've traveled this country. That's what you need to hold on to. So, thank you. What I'm talking about is what's happened with the unwinding business. Since this 45th president is in, that they're unwinding a lot of what was opportunistic in the ACA. The ACA didn't specifically address hospital nutrition, food, hospital intersections. What it did do is it put a newly found emphasis on prevention, which was a good thing. There was a prevention trust fund. There were different mechanisms for payment. There actually was, there were measures that allowed for expanded nutrition counseling at the community level. So the orientation to prevention in the ACA helped us, those that do the kind of work that I do and others do. What I meant to suggest is that it obviously, you just read the newspaper every day, it fomented a real values conflict and struggle because it shifted the way doctors and hospitals get paid, and it was a push in a change of thinking from short-term to long-term, from fee-for-service, volume, high-volume transactions, how many MRIs did we do today, over to more long-term thinking, holistic thinking about caring for people. So I think we're just in the middle of that values conflict now, and it's rugged and very messy, but I think there are enough people who understand what the underlying theory of it was. It's just, the ACA was a creature of political compromise, so there were a lot of holes in it, but from my point of view, it was a damn good starting place. Others would disagree, but I felt like it gave us something to work with it. But it didn't work out that way. We had changed administrations, and we didn't have a chance to stick with it with what the original blueprint and intention was. And so a lot of the immediate stuff, I mean, the prevention trust fund is gone. It's gone, you know. So I think, yeah, I'm sorry if I miscommunicated that. So no, I think we have to do it on our own for now, and then things will change, you know. We'll be in a different place 3 or 4 years from now and again, and we just have to keep on with the work and not let it be forgotten. Yeah, I have. So there's a component in that. There's not a lot of clarity yet because this is new, right? And the Medicaid population is the most needy and suffers most disproportionately from things like food insecurity. We know that. What there is there's a component in that plan called flex spending. And what is happening now, a couple of the groups that I referred to are now interacting with the administrators of that new approach to providing health care to the Medicaid population, making a case for the medically tailored home delivered meals so that we can keep people on Medicaid from having to go back into the hospital just because they don't have food, which would seem a lot cheaper than going in, you know. So there is a lot of advocacy within the piece of that budget that allows for flex spending to support food as medicine. And there are groups interacting with the state on that now. There is a lot of serious discussion among the major philanthropies of really consolidating and focusing on supporting that kind of research. They're pulling back from some other stuff that they're doing, like the Robert Wood Johnsons of the world, the Kresge's, these big foundations, and they're investing. I mean, the one study with Harvard and it's really Dr. Berkowitz and community servants. It's $360,000. So they're not working with pennies, and we need them to do more. We need them to be very strategic. We need them to meet together and check your ego at the door, as it said, and say, okay, we got to put a big bolus of money behind this kind of research. We now have young, talented investigators that are doing great research. We need to get it. We need to fund it. And it will go a long way if they do that. I think that's really starting to happen, and I'm optimistic that it'll continue. Unfortunately, a lot of it's being driven by the fact that they know that the government's not going to step into that space, so they're going to have to do it. So, the CEO, maybe I don't know if you were here at the very beginning, but the CEO is a physician whose specialty was preventive cardiology, and one of the first things I did with him was set up a prevention clinic. So he philosophically was already there. What I had to do with my team, other people on my staff, was to go out and try to quantify how are we going to serve this at this number. And it was very complicated because we had to, first of all, train the staff. They had no knife skills. They didn't know how to cook from scratch. And we had to take the leap that we were going to greatly simplify it and put the money into these whole ingredients. So what we did to convince everybody in our audiences, couldn't do it with patients. We did it mostly with employees and outpatients. We had a lot of tastings and a lot of fun events. See this, you know. So when they got a menu that was like this, instead of, you know, with 7 drink selections and stuff on it, they weren't it wasn't as alien as it might have been if we hadn't done some serious, and because I had people who helped me with this clever marketing. So it wasn't a problem of getting the CEO on board. He already really understood it. It was a problem of keeping it within budget and figuring out how we were going to do it. But we got there. I was very lucky. A lot. Now, in this root cause coalition, what's interesting, I just was in Louisville with the second summit. They had a CEO roundtable, and there are more CEOs that are understanding that now. I mean, we were like alone with this, believe me, when we were doing it. But now I'm seeing, because of the leadership of this fellow from Ohio, the CEO of a health system there are other CEOs that are they really understand it. One in Illinois, they have a farm. They have a 12-acre farm at the hospital, and they provide a CSA to all their employees. So they're not out there, you know, we were outliers. You know, that book by Malcolm Gladwell, I love that book, it's so interesting. But hey, good for us, got written up all like crazy. Now we can recycle that, and there are more people coming on board. Actually, it's really interesting, the dean there came from Harvard, the Tulane, yes. Right? And he really was behind this. I mean, the guy who runs the Goldring Center, which is the food as medicine thing, is an internist there. But see, you got to have the CEO as the dean, and he's a terrific guy. I know more about it in the public sector, in the senior center, you know, community-based. In the dedicated assisted living, senior living, that industry, it is an industry, you know, good, bad, or I'm not using the term negatively. I think there are variations. I've been asked to go in and talk with some of them, and they are as budget sensitive, if not more so, than the hospitals. And I think it's a problem. I think it's a bit of a problem. It's just that most of my work, I mean, this was at a nonprofit hospital, but after I left there, most of what I really wanted to do was in the public sector, because that's really where, that's how we reach people who are most hurt by all this deprivation. So I haven't really explored that too much, but that would be, you know, I do work with a lot of the Dietetic Association, the RDs, and do some speaking, and they're coming along too. They're a little more enlightened than just their former role as like calorie counters. You know, the RD, they're getting it. They're starting to understand the importance of whole foods and sourcing and all of that. Sorry, it wasn't a perfect answer. You know, I am not as up to date with what the AAMC, the Association, American Association of Medical Colleges are. And there is a big shift in curriculum. What I do know is the following. There's a shift in curriculum now. There are a lot of efforts going on with giving up greater balance to more clinical time with students versus lecture. So they may go, some schools are going to, instead of 2 years, 18 months of lecture and then the rest clinical. I'm a little disappointed by the lack of what I see happening. I mean, Harvard just cut back its nutrition hours when they decided to make their shift with the distribution between lecture, lab, and clinical. And I have a friend who wrote a big blog on it, who's at the medical school disagreeing with it. So that's one of the reasons the students at Yale were kind of, and Yale's a pretty conservative place. I mean, there are other med schools like Creighton and others more public health oriented. So I think there's a lot more work to be done there. Well, a little bit when I was at the hospital where we worked with that one fisherman but the best work that's being done there is being done, and a prior speaker gave a presentation on the New England Food Vision. The best work that's being done is by Farm to Institution New England. It's a group that is doing great work. And in particular, Maine, the state of Maine, and the college system, the public university system in Maine has done some terrific work. And they actually have mandates in their, I should have mentioned that, the Real Food Challenge, college, come on, you should have called me out for that. The movement on college campuses and universities is incredible. I mean, they're really busting it up. I mean, they are terrific. They have metrics. So that change, you know, and farm to school, I see that it all coming together. Hospitals they're the caboose, and maybe they're senior living. But anyway, the main, and then in Massachusetts, farm to school is doing some. Seed to school. We did have a lot happen during the Obama administration. We had, we had legislation that really changed, you know, what the composition of meals should be in schools, and a lot of emphasis was put on, you know, changing what the plate looked like, and a little bit of that has been pulled back by the current administration, but that makes a huge difference because that's a lot of kids being fed, and especially with poor children, most of what they eat every day. If you're talking about children that are eligible for the reimbursed meals, the USDA reimbursed meals, there's a lot of data that shows us that what they're eating, breakfast, lunch, snack, that may be all they eat all day long. And weekends and summers are a big problem. So there were a lot of measures, system-wide policy measures that were very good in the Hunger-Free, help me, Kids Act that the Congress passed. It's still kind of hanging out there, but we're going to probably see more changes coming up in this farm bill. I can't predict, I don't have a crystal ball. But I think it got, because there was enough data documenting these incidence rates, it got so much attention that we also had a lot of philanthropic money going in. And we had philanthropic money supporting like veggie prescriptions where you could double up the amount of your food stamp or your SNAP and things like that were. But these things they're great, they're wonderful, there'll never be enough money. We have to change the system at its core. But we want these things because if we can show that they're evidence for having positive impact, then we take the argument to the next level and we get other policy changes. Interestingly enough, the rates have stabilized among a certain age group of children. They were going like this, and then as of last year, they started to level. We want them to go down, but I think that's a result of the legislation that the Obama administration was successful in getting passed, and a very big focus by the philanthropic community funding a lot of programs and research. Integrating the other disciplines with medical schools and practitioners is a very big challenge, because in the medical schools it's so siloed because it's so intense. Not that what you're doing and what you're doing, it isn't intense as well, but it's culturally has been kind of insulated, and that's really what we have to work with. What I'm trying to work with at Yale is to open up and bring different disciplines together and understand how they can complement each other. Because really, for all of our history in this country, medicine and public health have been like this. They just do not talk to each other. And so that's something that what you've studied, what you're studying, that's what we have to work towards and find a friendly interface so we can do that. So what do I mean by that? Well, that's what we're doing now at Yale. We do workshops. We bring in, I got funding to do workshops where with residents, and we bring in all the different disciplines because they didn't get it in med school. So we bring folks in and we're, okay, how can we work with this? Who can have what role? And I'm also noticing that a lot more docs are going and getting MPHs, which is a really good thing, because then they take their practice in a different direction. And it used to, my generation, nobody did that. But nobody did as many MD, PhDs as they do now either, but those are the research people mostly. So I think that looking for opportunities, whether it's in a formal sense or informal sense, like at Tufts and the med school, nice, good med school, finding opportunities for that cross-pollination and that ideas, even if it's on an elective basis, some of what we do is elective, is appealing to the administration for more of that as a student. You're a paying customer, right? So you have to act like one. You can be nice, polite, but I think that, I see the advocacy coming from your generation saying, we would like more of this, and then helping organize it. That's what I call them kids, but from my point of view, they're kids at Yale. That's what they did. Oh, I used my registered dietitians. Okay. I used some of their, I allocated their time. They got paid, and we deployed them into the community. Now, I had fabulous RDs. They really got it about sustainability, whole foods. I can't say that the category in and of itself would always be appropriate. It takes somebody who has an enlightened, more holistic view. Because clinical RDs can do nothing all day long except enteral feeding, tube feeding. In a hospital, if that's what they want to do, that's great. We need people to do that, but that's not what we want to do in community-based prevention. So I used the assets I had in-house. Like I said, RDs, okay, if I can schedule over like 3 more hours every month to go to the day camps, and that's where I found the expertise on the nutrition side. And you can also challenge the food service vendors to come explain what this is. Show us what your farm to table is. Show us what if the parents ask for that, somebody has to hold them accountable. And who but the mother or father of a kindergartner? I mean, that's your right. You pay taxes and great. Thanks for having me. It was fun. Yeah. Okay. Bye.